Hello everyone and welcome to today's video. Today I'm doing a hypothetical 2024 presidential election prediction scenario, and this one involves a few different aspects. For one, I have right now the Democratic and Republican candidates being Kamala Harris and JD Vance. Based on the very early preliminary polling for 2028, Harris and Vance both are the leading candidates right now when people are asked who are the leaders for 2028. Right now, in the early race to the White House average, Kamala Harris holds about a 10-point lead over Pete Buttigieg for first place on the Democratic side. And when you look at the Republican primary side of things, J.D. Vance holds a large lead over the rest of the Republican candidates. President Trump's son, Donald Trump Jr., is currently in second place, though he has indicated he has no intentions of running in 2028. So Vance right now is the clear favorite to be the Republican nominee in 2028 should he run. So that's the first aspect of this video. The other aspect is some recent polls came out regarding President Trump's job approval rating, where right now on the RCP average, Trump is currently sitting at around 45.5% or so for approved, 52.1% disapproved. But in the most recent polls that have come out, ABC and New York Times both have Trump at 42%. CBS has him at 45%. And then we also had a Fox News one that had Trump at 44. In this scenario, it's going to be where Trump's approval rating continues to go down a bit. Not a drastic amount from 45%, but goes down to about 42% or so, as the new polls suggest. And just to give you a show of where this 42% or so is coming from, just to give you an idea, when you want to go back to the 2020 election, where Joe Biden defeated Donald Trump, Trump's approval rating was currently sitting at about 46% or so. In November, when President Trump defeated Kamala Harris, his approval rating was currently sitting just about 45.5% or so. So Trump's approval rating now is currently sitting where it was. In this scenario, Trump's approval rating continues to go down and starts out at 42%, which I think would present a lot of troubling situations for J.D. Vance in this election prediction. So for starters, I'm going to fill in all the states that I think will be safe for both Harris and Vance. Starting with Kamala Harris, I would give her as over 15% margin of victory the states of Washington, Oregon, California, Hawaii. I would probably throw Colorado into the over 15% mark at this point as well, with Trump's approval at 42%. I think that would have a negative effect on Vance's chances at winning. So I think Colorado would go safe Democrat as well. Illinois, I believe, would be safe, as well as D.C., Maryland, Rhode Island, Massachusetts, Delaware, Connecticut, Vermont, Maine's 1st Congressional District, and New York, I think, would just barely go above 15%. This would put Harris up to 177. These are all the states I think would be safe over 15 points for Harris at this time. Now, for the states over 15 for Vance, I think we have the states of Utah, Wyoming, Idaho, Montana, North and South Dakota, Nebraska at large, Nebraska's 3rd district, and in all likelihood Nebraska's 1st district as well. Oklahoma, Kansas would probably go over 15, Missouri, Arkansas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Tennessee, Kentucky, Indiana, West Virginia, and South Carolina. All of these states would bring Vance up to 122 electoral votes, and I think that's going to be it for states that I think start at 15% margin of victory or more. Now we're going to get into the states that did show some competitiveness in 2024, but I think in this scenario would probably be likely not safe, but still very close to being 15% or so. And the first state I want to start out with is the state of Virginia. Virginia saw a little bit of a push towards President Trump in 2024, where Harris won it by about 6 points over Trump, after 2020, where Biden won it by 10. In this hypothetical scenario, where Trump's approval rating around 42%, I think Harris would win the state probably by around 9% or so, about a 3-point improvement based on the last election. So Virginia would go there. I think the state of New Jersey would be very similar as well, where we saw Trump do very well in the state of New Jersey. It went for Harris by only 5.9% in 2024, after 2020, where it was a 16-point win for Biden over Trump. This time around, I think it would probably be about an 11-point win or so for Harris over Vance in this scenario, going back more towards the safe Democratic side, but still being likely Democratic. I think we have one more state with the state of New Mexico that would be likely Democratic. It voted for Harris by about 6 points over Trump in 2024. In 2020, it voted for Biden by about 10.8. In this scenario, I think Harris being able to get probably over 10 points in the state of New Mexico would certainly be possible. Another state that's usually in the competitive part that I usually include, actually I have one before I get to it, but I'll be getting into the state in a second. But the state of Maine voted in 2020 for Biden by about 9 points. It voted for Harris by about 7 in 2024. And this one, I think Harris could get probably over 10 points in Maine at large as well. Now, the state I was mentioning, the state of Minnesota, and its 10 electoral votes, it just voted for Kamala Harris by 4.2% over Donald Trump in 2024, after 2020 when Joe Biden won it by 7.1%. I think in this scenario, with Trump's approval being in the low 40s, I think it's more likely Minnesota would go over 5% margin of victory again, probably similar to that Biden number of about 7.5%, maybe 8%. This would put Harris up to 221. That's going to be it for all the states that go likely Democratic. However, I do have another call in the 2nd Congressional District in Nebraska where I think that would go likely Democratic, where we did just see it go for Kamala Harris by about 4.7%. That would be back in 2020. It went for Joe Biden by about 6.6%. New Hampshire is kind of right on the edge where it voted for Biden by 7.4 in 2020, but in 2024 it voted for Harris by 2.8. So it's right borderline between being safe or between being lean or likely, but actually I'm going to amend my statement and put New Hampshire as likely Democrat as well. I think it'd be a little bit under what Minnesota would be, probably about 6.5% or so in New Hampshire, but I think Harris getting over 5% margin of victory in New Hampshire is actually certainly possible. There are some states I think Vance would still win in the likely Republican margin, and I think the first state would be the state of Florida. Trump won the state by 13 points in 2024, and even in the scenario where Trump's approval is at 42%, I don't think Vance would do as well as Trump did with a 13-point win, but I think at very least it would still likely stay above 10 points on the Republican direction, putting Florida as likely Republican. The state of Alaska and its 3 electoral votes have voted for Trump by about 13 points, almost exactly the same margin as Florida did for Trump. In 2020, voted for Trump by 10 points. I think Alaska would probably again vote for Vance somewhere around that 10% threshold in this specific scenario, and that would also go likely Republican. The state of Texas and its 40 electoral votes, it showed a big shift towards Trump in 2024, up to 13.5% or so for Trump over Harris. After 2020, it went for Trump by only 5.6%. This one, the Democrats could certainly win some support back, but again, I think around a 10-point win or so, even with Harris improving a lot of margins in the scenario, I think Texas would still be over 10 points for Vance over Harris. This puts Harris at 226, Vance at 195. I do still think the state of Ohio, even in this scenario, it voted for Trump by about 11.2% in 2024, up from 8% in 2020. In this specific scenario, I think Ohio could probably be about a 9 to 9.5% win or so for Vance over Harris. Again, shifting a little bit back towards the Democrats, but still a very reliable, likely Republican state. In the state of Iowa and its 6 electoral votes, it went for Trump by 13 points in 2024, 8 points for Trump in 2020. I think in this scenario, it could probably be about another 9 to 10 point win for Vance over Harris. This puts the map at 226 for Harris, 218 for Vance, and that's all the likely characterizations at this point. Now we go into the lean ones. And the Maine 2nd District is tough because I think this is one that voted for Donald Trump by about 9 points. But without Trump being at the top of the ballot to get Republican voters out to vote for him, and with Trump's approval rating being at 42% in this scenario, I do think there would be some lack of voter turnout that could hurt Vance a little bit. In Maine 2nd District, I think it'd be just under 5 points for Vance, where he'd win Maine 2nd District, but he'd probably win it by like 4.7%, similar to the margin we saw in Nebraska too this time around. I think Maine 2nd District could be like that. This just puts Vance at 219, Harris at 226. Now for the rest of the states, these are all would be what I would consider the main battleground states for 2028 right now. And it's about 93 electoral votes spread out across these about 7 or so battleground states. Now we're going to start out west with the state of Nevada. Nevada voted for Donald Trump, the Republican, for the first time since George W. Bush in I believe 2004, almost said 2024. In 2004, it voted for Bush, voted for Trump for the first time in 2024 by 3.1%. It did vote for Joe Biden by 2.4% back in 2020. Nevada's seen a shift to the Republican direction in 2022 and 2024, which I do think does put Vance in play at winning Nevada in 2028, even in this scenario. But I do think, given the trends with Trump's approval at 42% and likely the lack of Republican enthusiasm and turnout compared to 2024 and even 2020, in this scenario, I think Harris winning the state of Nevada back to the Democrats is certainly possible, and I would put Nevada probably around somewhere around 2% to 1.5% for Harris over Vance in this scenario. The state of Arizona is a little bit more tricky because it swung a lot to the Republican direction. In 2024, it voted for Trump by 5.5%, whereas back in 2020, it voted for Biden over Trump by just 0.31%. Even with Trump's approval rating at 42%, I don't think Kamala Harris will be able to get a lot of Democratic voters turned out the same way Joe Biden did back in 2020. So in the state of Arizona, I think Harris would be able to make a lot of improvements, but I think she would just fall a little bit short in the state of Arizona. But I think Arizona going by about 1 point or so, maybe a little bit over, for Vance about 1.5% or so, I think is certainly possible. This will put Harris at 232, Vance at 230. Now we're on to the state of Georgia, which Georgia actually, even though Kamala Harris lost the state in 2024 by 2.2%, it was some good news for the Democrats, where the surrounding Atlanta area and Fulton County and DeKalb County and Gwinnett County did continue to trend to the Democratic direction. So in this scenario, where Trump's approval rating is about 3% worse than it was in 2024, coupled with the fact where Harris is expected to do better and 4 years of population growth in Atlanta, Kamala Harris winning the state of Georgia, I think, is certainly possible. The question will be what the margin will be. Because Trump won it by 2.2 in 2024, when Biden won it, he won it by 0.24%, so very, very close. Could Kamala Harris break 1% in the state of Georgia, making it lean Democratic? She certainly could. For now, I'm going to lean it as tilt Democrat, means it goes Democrat by under 1 point, but I think it is certainly possible Georgia could go for more than 1 point for Harris over Vance in this scenario. North Carolina and its 16 electoral votes is really fascinating because it voted for Donald Trump by about 3.2%, around the same margin of Nevada voting for Trump in 2024. After 2020, where it voted for Joe Biden by about 1.3, or voted for Donald Trump over Joe Biden by about 1.3% in a very, very close race. It last went for Obama in 2008, was the last time he went Democrat over McCain. And this is going to be tough because at 3.2%, it is certainly very possible that in a scenario where Trump's approval is at 42%, voter turnout's down, this might actually be the election where a Democrat is capable of flipping the state of North Carolina to the Democratic side. I don't think it's something that's going to happen. I think North Carolina is more of a lean Republican state than many online seem to think it is. But I do think in this scenario, where Harris seems to have a little bit of a momentum and Trump and his approval rating doing poorly is going to hurt Vance and hurt voter turnout, North Carolina barely flipping to the Democrats by under 1 point, probably even under half a point, is something that I think is certainly very possible. This puts Harris within striking distance of winning the presidential election at 264, Vance sitting at about 230, with the 3 Rust Belt states left to decide the election. And historically, Pennsylvania would be the state, or based on the last few elections, that chose which state or which candidate won the election. And this election, I think, would actually be Wisconsin, where it voted for Donald Trump by the smallest margin in 2024 at 0.86% over Harris. After 2020, it went for Biden by 0.63%. In 2016, it voted for Trump by 0.76. So that's 3 elections in a row Wisconsin has been decided by under 1 point. However, the recent Supreme Court election showed that the Democrats do have a lot of enthusiasm in the state of Wisconsin, and if the election environment is right, the Democrats are certainly capable of winning, and winning relatively big in the state of Wisconsin. Now, obviously, presidential elections are different than a special Supreme Court election, but I think in this scenario, with Trump's low approval rating, I think Wisconsin going for Harris by over more than 1 point, going by about 1.5 to 2 or even 2.5% in the state of Wisconsin is certainly feasible. In the electoral map where Nevada's going blue, Georgia's going blue, and North Carolina's going blue, I think Wisconsin going blue by a larger margin than at least North Carolina and Georgia is certainly very feasible. The state of Michigan, I think, is in a little bit of a similar situation. It voted for Donald Trump by 1.4% in 2024. After 2020, it voted for Biden by about 2.8%. So it's voted more Republican than Wisconsin in 2024, which I expect the margins would probably hold up. In this map, it would stay a little bit more Republican than Wisconsin would. But I think, again, Harris winning it by over 1 point, making it lean Democrat, I think in this scenario is certainly very feasible. And that leaves the state of Pennsylvania, the most Republican of the three in 2024, at 1.7%. But again, it voted for 1.2% for Joe Biden back in 2020. Again, it could be lean Democrat for Harris. It could be tilt Democrat. I would actually start it as tilt Democrat. But in this scenario, Trump's approval rating down about 3 points from what it was in 2024 is going to hurt Vance, is going to hurt Republican voter turnout. And in this scenario, I would have Harris winning the 2028 election at 308 electoral votes, Vance 230. This is obviously a hypothetical prediction. This is not my official 2028 prediction, not to mention it's only 2025, so it really doesn't have much bearing for 2028, but it's just an interesting scenario where if Trump's approval rating does continue to fall another 3 points over the next few years or so, it really could be detrimental to the Republicans' chances at winning in 2028, as without Trump at the top of the ticket, a lot of Republicans who flip to the Republican Party for Trump may never vote for another Republican again, even if it is J.D. Vance. So the fact is that alone is going to be a problem for Republicans, and if Trump is losing support across the country with independents, definitely with Democrats, but definitely with independents as well, and maybe even some Republicans, that could make another problem even worse for Republicans in 2028. But I'm interested to hear your thoughts on this video. Do you think something like this is possible, where Trump's approval rating continues to go down a little bit, where Democrats have energized their voters, get out to vote, and win 308 to 230 for Harris over Vance? What are your thoughts? Leave a comment below telling me what you think about all that. Thank you so much for watching, and hope to see you in the next video.